On this channel, we talk about biblical prophecy and specifically about Revelation. One of the crucial topics we need to understand is the role that the Ten Commandments play in the end times. In chapter 11 of Revelation, it mentions that the temple of God in heaven is open to reveal the Ark of the Covenant where the Ten Commandments are kept. And in the previous video, which I'll link up here in case you missed it, we explained that Revelation describes the saved as those who keep God's commandments. In Exodus chapter 31, it tells us that Moses received the tablets of the law written by God himself. It is the only part in the entire Bible where God did not entrust any human being with writing the text. Instead, as verse 18 says, he wrote it himself with his own finger. There is no other summary of laws known that is so brief and yet so complete. Covers every aspect of life. Join me as we analyze the most famous compilation of precepts in history. Let's begin. In Luke 10 verses 25 to 27, Jesus is asked what must be done to inherit eternal life, and he confirms that you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. In Mark chapter 12 verses 30 and 31, Jesus again mentions both commandments, saying that the first is the most important and the second is similar to the first, which is in complete harmony with what was already written in the Old Testament, since in Deuteronomy 6 verse 5 and Leviticus 19 verse 18, Moses had already said exactly the same thing. But in Matthew 22 verse 37, recounting the same event, it adds one more detail. It tells us that Jesus said that all the law and the prophets depend on these two commandments, making it very clear that love for God and love for your neighbor is a summary of God's law. In Romans 13 verses 9 to 10, Paul, speaking about the commandments, and to leave no doubt that he is talking about the 10 commandments, starts listing them. He says, "You shall not commit adultery, you shall not kill, you shall not steal, you shall not bear false witness, you shall not covet," and so on. Then he says that all of these are summed up by the phrase, "You shall love your neighbor as yourself." And then in the next verse, he says that the fulfillment of the law is love, making it very clear as well that the 10 commandments are, in other words, completely summed up by love for God and love for people. So, when God gives Moses the 2 tablets of the law, he is actually giving him practical, concrete instructions on how to show love to God and to others. A true masterpiece of law and literature where nothing is by chance. And today we are going to analyze it from several different perspectives. The first, its balance. We can find the 10 commandments in the Bible in Exodus, chapter 20, verses 1 through 17. The first 4 commandments talk about how we show our love for God, and the last 6, how we show our love for our neighbor. The 10 commandments are the perfect balance in expressing that love. Neither too general nor too specific. Loving God and your neighbor is too general a summary, because that phrase leaves it up to each person to show love however they want. God's law, which is summarized by those 2 phrases as we've seen before, solves this problem by clarifying how that love should be expressed. But at the same time, God's law isn't too specific either. It strikes just the right balance in 10 statements. The Jews tried to spell everything out in detail and made a mistake, because they made the list so long and hard to follow that it became an end in itself. That's what it means to be legalistic. No, God's law is not an end in itself. Its purpose is to lead us to Christ. That's why in the Torah it doesn't talk so much about keeping the law as it does about walking in it. The second aspect of the law we're going to consider is its order. The 10 commandments cover the entirety of human activity. Action, speech, and thought. When it comes to our relationship with our neighbor, the order is clearly descending. You shall not kill refers to the crime against life, physical aggression. You shall not commit adultery, a crime against the family, a moral offense. You shall not steal, a crime against property, an economic offense. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor, a crime against reputation, a verbal offense. And you shall not covet anything that belongs to your neighbor, a crime at the level of desire, a mental offense, a symmetry. There is harmony in the 10 commandments. The symmetrical correspondence between the 2 tablets is far from coincidental. I am your God who has given you and saved your life. You shall protect life. You shall have no other gods. You shall be faithful to your partner. You shall respect my name and my property, and you shall respect your neighbor's possessions. You shall offer me true worship. You shall always tell the truth. You shall honor your parents. You shall respect other families. Their morphology, the person. God does not speak to a group of people. He addresses you individually. They are formulated in the second person singular, which carries the strongest binding force. In this way, God addresses each one of us in an intimate and personal manner. The verb tense. Pay close attention to what I'm about to tell you now, because this is truly surprising. Each action is accompanied by its own verb tense. In fact, it's the verb tense itself that unmistakably reveals the speaker's intention. The verb tense that God uses in the Ten Commandments is the negative imperfect future. Okay, so knowing this, let's see what the author's intention might be. The most logical and natural thing is to think that these are prohibitions. Even though throughout my whole life I've seen a ton of prohibition signs, I have never, ever seen them written in the negative imperfect future. For orders and prohibitions, the infinitive is usually used for written rules, no running or running prohibited. And the present imperative is used for spoken commands, don't run or I forbid you to run. But using the future tense to prohibit, you will not run? How many times have you ever gone to a pool and seen a sign that says, you will not run along the edge of the pool? Or, you will not enter with glass bottles? No, the verb tense doesn't match a prohibition. So, if it doesn't match a prohibition, what would the author's intention be? Threats, maybe? Impossible, because threats are used for bad things. You can't threaten someone to honor their father or mother or not to kill. What kinds of actions could the commandments be? Wishes, maybe? No, not that either. The tense for wishes is any tense in the subjunctive mood. And since it's expressed in the negative future, the options don't match. So what kind of action could the Ten Commandments be? Pay attention, because what I'm about to tell you is very important. The psychological and theological difference between do not kill and you shall not kill is significant enough to deserve our attention. There's only one possible intention that fits perfectly with this verb tense. They're promises. I promise you that you shall not kill. To receive the commandments as prohibitions, that is, as conditions for acceptance, would be biblically false as well as theologically absurd. They are not prohibitions or conditions for acceptance. They are promises, meaning the result of acceptance. God first freed them from Egypt, and only then, afterwards, did he give them the tablets of the law. That's why, when you enter the sanctuary, the first thing you see is the sacrifice of Christ, which frees us from the sin of the world. And then, only then, does he offer you sanctification. I promise you that if you come to me, says Jesus, if you surrender yourself unconditionally, I will be able to free you from sin, and then you will not steal. You will not speak against your neighbor, but that's not all. I promise you that you will not covet anything. Now the verb actually matches. It's impossible not to see it. If as children we already hate being told what to do, we can stand being forbidden from something even less. Orders are systematically questioned, but prohibitions seem to automatically provoke the desire to do what is forbidden. If up until now you've seen the Ten Commandments as just a series of prohibitions, I can assure you that you're not understanding them. That's why, many times in the ancient Hebrew of the Old Testament, they weren't called the Ten Commandments, but rather the 10 words, which is where the Greek term Decalogue comes from. Satan has managed to deceive everyone regarding these 10 words of God. Outside of Christianity, they're not even taken into account. It's ignored. Within Christianity, either they believe that with Christ it no longer has any validity, that it was repealed, abolished, or cancelled, or they've changed it, it was modified. And among the few who believe in the biblical text as it is, many misinterpret it, thinking that these are heavy and tedious obligations. Finally, let me talk to you about its prologue. Almost always, the Ten Commandments are listed starting with the word no. They show an incomplete, mutilated text, because these words can't be understood without their prologue. What stands out is that God doesn't present himself as all-powerful or omnipresent, or even as a lawgiver. If he's going to give you a law, it would make sense for him to introduce himself as the judge of all the earth. But no, he presents himself as a liberator, the one who brought you out of Egypt. This introductory phrase is linked to the next one, making them inseparable. Literally, it could be read as follows: I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. Therefore you shall have no other gods before me. You were oppressed up to your neck by the pharaohs, and I have set you free. And now you are truly going to be free, not just from all your idols, but also from the terror of spirits, from sorcerers, from fear, from the forces of nature, and from the unknown. A text that begins with such a liberating statement can never be understood as just prohibitions and commands. It would be like seeing two gods in the same text, one liberator and the other oppressor. God gives a recipe to a people who have already been freed to lead them to a higher quality of life, not to make their lives miserable, not to impose a new kind of slavery. The one who freed his people from Egypt wants, even more so, to free them from their fears, violence, family troubles, hatred, and so on. God proposes a way of life so different from what they were used to that even today it can't really be understood in theory, unless we experience it little by little. How is it possible that what seems like a list of restrictions actually turns out to be a path to freedom? It seems like a paradox, but in reality, it's simple to understand. Only when you are walking in God's ways are you truly free, because at any moment you can choose whether to continue on his path or turn away from him. But the one who turns away from Jesus and falls into the addiction of sin can no longer choose. You can choose to do drugs, but the addict doesn't know how to get out of drugs. John 8 verse 32 and 36 say, "You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." And in verse 36 it says, "So if the Son sets you free, you will be truly free." Each commandment opens a path to freedom for us, inviting us to be 10 times freer. You will be free from imaginary gods, from the influences of spirits and stars, and from the fears of the occult. You will be free from the paralyzing superstitions of images and from idolatry. You will be free from the trivialization of the sacred and of God, and you will learn to respect him better. You will be free from the chains of work and leisure, so you can learn to work and rest fully at the right time, both in body and in spirit. You will be free from selfish individualism, reconciling with the roots of your existence. You will be free from the dangers of aggression, so you can enjoy life in support of brotherhood. You will be free from false love, so you can enjoy a complete and unconditional love with your partner. You will be free from material dissatisfaction and the need to possess at any cost. You will be free from deceit, so you can enjoy a full life without having to distort the truth. And finally, you will be free from the chains of envy, fully enjoying what you have. Each point of the Decalogue invites us to free ourselves from some of the countless forms of bondage that we humans tend to fall into. It's not enough just to love freedom. You also need to know what to do with it. That's why in James 1 verse 25 it speaks of the perfect law, the law of freedom. Throughout all of human history, people have consistently made gods and idols in their own image and likeness. Yet, God's true intention for each and every one of us is that he alone be the one to lovingly transform us into his own image and likeness. I don't know what kind of slavery you're dealing with in your life today. The idolatry of money, selfishness, adultery, envy, lying, greed, whatever form of bondage Satan has found to enslave you, Jesus offers to set you free. Give him a chance. And don't forget that understanding what I'm explaining to you today could determine your eternal salvation and that of your family.